During the Renaissance period, Leonardo da Vinci painted me, the Mona Lisa. Music was played by troubadours with lutes. Singers performed madrigals. Michelangelo was creating his masterpieces. Inventions included the printing press, eyeglasses, and gunpowder.
But during the 17th century, music began to change. People began to dress differently. String instruments were grouped together in what were called orchestras. The harpsichord was added to almost every piece of music, and it sounded like this. Thank you. This was a time of fancy music, fancy buildings,
fancy hair, fancy pants,
fancy dogs.
Well, not quite fancy dogs, but fancy everything else. Welcome to the Baroque period.
The Baroque period.
I'm so excited, I'm joined by Madame Elizabeth. We shall do a Baroque greeting. Yeah, very fancy. Now, in the Baroque period, they would fancy everything up a bit. They even fancied up music, and they did it by adding trills. What is a trill? I hear you cry. A trill is a fast wobble shared with the note above it. I'll show you. Very fancy, a trill. Another thing they used to add to their music was the turn. The turn is a bit like a wave of the ocean. It goes along, up, below, and back to the same note. Listen to this. That was a turn. Again, very fancy. And then they added appoggiaturas. Appoggiatura. Now, an appoggiatura is a note, a little note, before the main note that you want to sing. And that makes it fancy again. Listen to this. So a trill, a turn, and an appoggiatura. Now, we're going to add those three fancy Baroque bits to a famous tune, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Off we go.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Very fancy.
If the Baroque period was a cake, it would be fancy. A fancy Baroque cake, 1600 to 1750.
Get it! Look at that! The Baroque period, 400 years ago, 1600 to 1750. Look on there. That is Vivaldi. He was one of the greatest composers of the Baroque period.
That is my music. Don't we know it? Ugh.
He loved to include trills, turns, and appoggiaturas in his music. Hang on a minute. I wonder what it was like to live 400 years ago.
In the beginning of the Baroque period, William Shakespeare was writing plays in England. And Louis XIV was the fanciest and most famous king of France to ever live. He owned 1,000 wigs. But he only wore them one at a time. There were no dentists. If you had a bad tooth, the barber pulled it. After he cut your hair. There were no forks. There was no electricity. Everything was done by candlelight, which means there was no TV. Hey! What's the big deal?
So we've got Shakespeare, fancy buildings, fancy this, fancy that. The Baroque period, quick! To the phone box! Hang on, what are you doing here?
I can't get back to the Baroque period. I'm stuck in a time warp.
Right, stay here, I'll be back.
No, I'm coming with you.
Come on! Johan! This way. So, in the Baroque period, they used the harpsichord.
Yes, a harpsichord. The strings are plucked by a piece of goose feather. Here, take a look.
Right, so when I hit a key, the goose feather plucks the string. Cool.
I cut the pluckers for my dad. When a piece of music is being played, the bass notes are played by a... Look, here's one.
Yeah, the cello. Right. You play the bass notes, I'll play the harpsichord. 1, 2.
The cello plays the bass notes, and the harpsichord plays the chords in rhythm.
A bit like the bass and drums in a rock band.
A rock band? What is that, a band of rocks? That's crazy. Wait till I tell my dad.
Who is your dad?
He's Johann as well. Johann Sebastian Bach. You won't have heard of him.
He's Bach's son.
The most famous composers of the Baroque period were Bach, Handel, and Vivaldi. Most of them wrote music for rich kings, princes, or the church. They wrote choir pieces, orchestra pieces, organ pieces, and were prolific, which means they did a lot of music writing. Bach was a master at writing fugues, which are a bit like rounds.
You mean like row your boat?
Sort of. They were like musical puzzles. You take a little bit of tune. Then you start that tune at a different point in the same piece. He wrote loads. He was fugue mad. Vivaldi wrote the Four Seasons, a fancy Baroque piece that had 4 sections all about the seasons of the year. And Handel wrote a piece called The Messiah. You may have heard it playing in your house when your dad gets a pay raise.
Where did that come from? Thank my lucky stars! Woohoo!
Handel, Vivaldi, or Bach, Johann's dad, was some of the greatest Baroque composers. In fact, in the Baroque period, the orchestra was just starting. There was only 3 violins, 3 violas, which were a bit bigger and lower pitched than violins, 3 cellos, 2 double basses.
Ready?
Hang on. A harpsichord, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 1 bassoon, a timpani player who didn't really do very much, and that's about it.
My dad adds a trumpet and a horn sometimes, too.
And clarinets came along a bit later in the Baroque period. Now today, we've added a few more players.
No one sits on chairs either, but the harpsichord does stay in the middle.
Wow. Sorry. Now, also, in the Baroque period, there were no women in the orchestra either. But for now, we'll keep it as it is.
My dad wrote this piece. It's called Air on a G String.
Great. Well, seeing as your dad wrote it, why don't you conduct it?
Conducting? What is that? The person on the harpsichord is the leader.
I guess that's me. Okay, let's hit it. Air on a G string by Bach. Here we go. Hear how the harpsichord plays the chords and the rhythm, and the cello or bass plays the steady bass part. That's a great way to recognise Baroque period music. Listen. Right, Vivaldi's up there, Handel's up there. I've got this goose feather, which is used to make the pluckers for harpsichords. You've got the clarinet. We'll put that at the end of the Baroque period because it didn't come along till later. Anything else?
And a bass.
Yeah, and a bass. And also, there's a picture of Bach up there.
Where'd you get a picture of my dad?
Your dad? Bach was one of the greatest composers to ever live.
No, he's just my dad. I have to get back to the Baroque period. I have a test in school in 10 minutes.
Right, well, get into the phone box, dial 1720, pick up that big black thing, put it to your ear, and shout, "Dad!" Like that. Off you go. Oh, and give your dad one of them, and give me one of them.
He's gone back to the future.
Back in the time. Did he say, I'll be back?
Oh, no, you did it. You did it.
Yeah, and I feel a wealthier man for going Baroque.
Oh, that was
I don't get it. I really don't get that. I don't understand.